Yo, I've been going for a little minute. I usually don't like to go this long without uploading, but this video took me a little longer to write. I actually usually don't write at all. I just have little bullet points to keep me on topic because my videos are usually more chaotic and annoying, to be honest. But this is actually one of the video ideas that led to me making this channel. And this is a video that requires a more serious tone, as uncomfortable as that makes me. Because while I typically like to talk about stories from a non-serious, carefree perspective, Vinland Saga is a story that offers a true glimpse into the human mind in a way that no other story has for me, and helped me realize so many things about human nature, what makes humanity special, and why we live in the first place. As humans, what are we? Well, we're animals, we're mammals, we need to eat, breathe, sleep, and have sex like every other creature. But why is it that we've developed so differently and accomplished so much more than any other species? It's not our physical capabilities. We get stomped out by a majority of the animal kingdom. It's not our intelligence either. There are plenty of animals like dolphins and chimps that have intelligence similar to ours, but they haven't come close to developing societies as advanced as ours. There's something else in us that's indescribable. Some would call it a soul, but there's this part of us as humans that is not wholly rational, that is able to forego our base desires in the aim of something higher. It's the reason why you can look at another person and empathize with their pain, the reason true warriors are born. It drives us to work together towards common goals, but we're still animals, and we still chase our base desires just as aggressively as any other, just in a different way. As humans, we know we're stronger together, and that's why we care for each other. We build communities as ways to keep us and our loved ones safe. And I think as humans, it gives us this false sense of selflessness, but we are just as selfish as any animal. Your average human is just as selfish as a dog. In fact, he's worse, because he has the higher reasoning to know better, yet he stoops to the same barbaric level as a mutt in the street. It's just that aside from food, water, and shelter, there is another base desire that humans hold. It's hard to understand the selfishness of humanity without first understanding love as described in Vinland Saga. I, along with most people I've spoken to, was confused on the definition of love on first watch, but it spoke to me because as people, we like to think our love will make us less selfish and more caring, but we experience the exact opposite. Our love for one makes us hate another, simply because the human understanding of love is flawed. Everything we do as humans is in our own self-interest, including how we love. We carefully dissect and decide which things are worthy of our care based on our own affinity for them and their value in our lives, and hide this discrimination behind the guise of love. This feeling is not love, it's simply selfish discrimination. This feeling you use to give special treatment to those close to you is the same feeling used to justify wars, murder, and one-sided slaughter. The idea that as a human, some humans are of no concern to you, while others mean the world to you. This flawed idea of love is not the cure for hate and distrust, but its very source. And this all stems from the ego, something only humans have. The idea that your love is something to be coveted after, and people you deem unworthy should have no access to it. There's a reason why the priest says only a dead man knows true love, because true love has nothing to do with warm feelings. It's funny because I'm not religious at all, but the biblical understanding of this moment perfectly highlights the message of this scene. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. Love knows no discrimination, but humans do. Humans were cast from the Garden of Eden, cast from paradise, and stripped of our love. It's why we sin and why we discriminate, why we distrust and conspire against each other, why we harm our neighbor instead of loving them. But why? It's not like love is hard to come by. It's in the trees, it's in the sun, it's in the air, because love, in its purest form, is life itself. An unyielding acceptance for and peace with the world around you, a world with no enemies. Something humans are seemingly incapable of, at least from Canut's viewpoint, because we are humans and still simple animals. We are biased, hateful, but beyond all, we are selfish, but none more so than those on the path of a warrior. You who are furthest from love. This is how Canut described Bjorn upon his awakening. And this assessment applies to everyone on that warrior path. When you choose to take up weapons, you only stray further and further from love. You will face endless amounts of pain and anguish. So why do people do it? It's because there's something humans care for and protect more than anything else, even more than their own life. It's their ego, their pride. Man is such a foolish creature. If he has to choose between life or pride, he'll usually choose pride. People find pride in so many things, and they are all meaningless. Pride in their accomplishments, pride in their race, pride in their country. The human ego fuels all of it, and the warrior is a being who acts purely according to his ego. When we watch a story set so far in the past, I think we take for granted how prevalent this mindset has been and still continues to be for all of human history. The mindset of the Viking warrior is no different from a military soldier, a mob boss, or even the modern day gangbanger. A life where you set aside your own life and love for the sake of pride. I'm sure many of us pity Bjorn in that scene because we feel like we are good, therefore exempt from this admonishment. But me, the person making this video, and you watching it, we are no better than Bjorn. We already look at the news and Twitter and celebrate terrible things happening to people we deem evil and don't think about it twice. And why? It's not like anything good happened. A bad thing happened to someone bad. There is zero good in that, but we don't care. We quickly convince ourselves they deserve it and scrub our hands of any guilt while feigning moral superiority. We've even created a fancy word for it. Justice. Justice is another figment of the human ego, a convenient excuse for our own maliciousness. When something makes us upset enough, we decide the people responsible must be punished, even though it won't right the wrong. What's done has been done, but we still seek justice because it appeases us. Another selfish want of humanity that we love to frame as virtuous. Are we really that far from justifying the slaughter of others for our own gain? No, we are simply lucky to not have been born into a warrior society. Just like Bjorn, we simply walk along the lines of the society we live in without question. You have no moral superiority to these people you deem to be monsters. You're simply lucky to have been born with caring relatives and friends. Lucky to be born without the urge to kill. Lucky to be born in a world where you're not forced to fight. I mean, look at Thorfinn. We forgive Thorfinn for what he's done because we've seen his life from the beginning and we empathize with him. But if you knew Thorfinn in real life and bore witness to his sins in real time, do you really think you would accept him? Of course not. We'd call him an irredeemable monster, something none of us could ever become, capable of things none of us are capable of. And that's because the ego tricks us into thinking we are better than others, when all humans are victims of circumstance. Our pride blinds us to the true potential of humanity. All of the things you find pride in, your intelligence, your physical capabilities, your attractiveness, all of this will mean nothing when you die, yet we cling to it. We feel these things have so much importance to our lives when they typically don't. They are nothing but convenient shields for the ego. The ego makes us feel ownership over these things when none of them are ours. Nothing, no matter how intrinsic to you, is yours. It was all bestowed upon you at birth at random and will be taken from you upon your death. You are lucky to be born how and where you were. You're not even any better than a serial killer. You are simply lucky to not have been born with the same brain as Jeffrey Dahmer. And if you were born with his brain, do you really think you could stop yourself from committing atrocities? Our ego drives us in so many ways. It is the reason we have pride and also the reason we feel shame. Shame is the strongest, most painful feeling humans share, and that's for a reason. As social creatures, we need to use shame to pressure people into acting for the benefit of society. It's a way for us to naturally police each other. And thus, the fear of shame guides us and pushes us to do things we never do otherwise. Olmar, someone who knew nothing of battle, sought after it simply to fuel his ego, even though he had his whole life laid out for him, a perfect path to happiness and peace. He rejected it in favor of war. Pride is funny because it tricks us into thinking we are strong, when pride is nothing but a weakness, a fear of shame. This fear of shame is what leads Olmar to attack Canut's men, and causes him and his family much more pain in the aftermath. To Olmar, Thorgil, and the rest of the Norsemen, this is seen as a noble thing to do. As a man, you fight for your honor. But the man who gets upset and resorts to violence is no different from the child who throws a tantrum. They both come from the same place, yet one of them is not viewed as the pathetic act that it is, simply because they have the strength to fight. But what always intrigued me about this moment was the reaction of Thorgil and Canut's men who come to tease Olmar. They make fun of him when they are just as much of fools as him. The same fate awaits them both, but they feel superior because they have more skill in war, something that, like I mentioned earlier, will not matter when they die, but their pride blinds them to that fact. In the end, it takes the entire battle and for Olmar to take a life himself, for him to drop his pride, forget his fear of shame, and surrender. He learned from Thorfinn the power of humility and the futility of hanging on to your pride so tightly. And this, juxtaposed to Thorgil, who hangs on to his pride as his only prized possession, is beautiful. While Olmar finds happiness, Thorgil is now nothing but an animal, living to fulfill his base desires and shield his ego. And because he, unlike Olmar, was unable to let go of that, he now lives all alone in a world without love, a world where everyone is your enemy. And you might think that this issue of pride and ego only affects individuals, but this hubris that humans have has an effect on a societal scale. As humans, we believe ourselves to be so smart, so morally superior, that we can look at every human on Earth and come up with objective rules for them to follow, based on their race, based on their age, based on their gender, as if we just have everything figured out. And you may think that this only stops at racism, or misogyny, or homophobia, but you do it every day in your regular life. We think ourselves so above everything that we can tell people that we've never even met how to live their lives, because we just have the objective truth of life. Like you just have the blueprint of life and what it means to be a good person laid out in front of you. I mean, it manifests itself in our rules and our laws, the way that we divide ourselves. None of us are free from it. We just have a really convenient way of blinding ourselves to it. This idea of love that I talk about in this video is simply the ideal to live by. As Thorfinn learns on his journey, life is much more complicated and it's far harder to live these ideals than it is to preach it. Even worse, there will always be simple-minded people, driven by their ego, led astray by the world that surrounds them. As people, this love might be completely unattainable. We may only see small glimpses of it in our lifetime, but we'll still chase after it because we are human.